Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
You know, it's a wonder that we still have a class left after thugs like Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, and Apple, and the rest of the technical media that they've done to us. But pass the word on, class. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm here. Finally.
Well, you know, Rick, so I got an email from Joey.
Cool.
And he said, sent me a link. Went to the link. And the link shows for only $19,999, you can rent a domain name. Your domain name, Rick.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird? They're going after me in every corner or orifice, every single corner they can get me. They're going to get you. A bunch of BS is what it is. And
are you frosted? I'm frosted.
What's that?
I'm frosted about that.
Well, there's several reasons this happened. One of which is not good, and I should not ever speak ill of the dead, and that's part of the problem. I have a lot of friends, and I'm a really generous man. And because of this, I don't see things that I should see. What does that mean? Well, I'm innocent, and so I don't think like a criminal, and so I don't notice things that are happening to me until they're too late, and I turn around and go, what? Now, with that said, I'm also intelligent enough that I don't make the same mistake twice. And so I'm blessed in that regard. I'm not going to ever make another mistake like this, but it's constant where someone will offer to help me, and really what it's about is not helping me as much as it's helping them. Now, I don't have a problem with that unless it puts me at risk. If it puts me at risk, that's a different matter altogether. And the problem is, I never thought about it and what risk might be involved until it was too late. And we all have these things that happen to us where we want to help somebody. Somebody wants to help you. They stop because you have a flat tire and they want to help you. That's a good thing. A bad thing is why they might want to help you. And that's the second part of the big equation. I read an article last night in the paper about this woman in South Carolina that rescued animals that had been abandoned in homes during the hurricane. And she got arrested because she did not have a proper veterinary license. Now, they dropped the charges on her, and that's why it made the national news, because yuck. But it's asymptomatic of the problem when you go to stop to help somebody and the dangers that now occur when somebody wants to help you or you want to help somebody. Now, what happened for me was that I am still in a place where I cannot afford normal help. in costs of things. I have and have been blessed with some of my best friends, Larry Norringer, Christian Vickers, others that have Mahala Marshall Rood, that helped me with my websites. The problem is, one of them forgot to transfer the domain name into my name, and then promptly died. And what happened next was that domain name was vulnerable, and when it came up for renewal, there was someone in front of me that got it. And now they want to hold it ransom to me. And I won't do it. And so I won't do that. It doesn't, in terms of my history and the way I grew up, I got kicked out of high school the first day of high school because I wouldn't bully. It was someone that was way bigger than me. And so what I did when I had to stop that nonsense is I took a baseball bat to his head and I actually put him in the hospital. And I got kicked out of school the first day of high school. And the rest is history. I remember him getting me out in the parking lot, lifting me up with one arm. Yeah, he was that big. And he was going to do me for what I did to him. And I just looked at him and told him he better do a very good job because I'm going to get him again. And he rethought his processes, and I never had to go through bullying again in high school. I am constantly being challenged. People that have a bigger dick than I do, they might have a bigger muscle, bigger, taller, more money, constantly trying to bully me. And I'm prepared to die. I won't do it. It's the little death.
Gotta be careful.
I know. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Be careful how you describe things.
It is testosterone. It is the idea that somebody is bigger than me and can tell me what I can and can't do. And that's the part that isn't right in the universe with everything, because people are trying to control each other in what they can and cannot do. And this rental thing of websites where somebody has determined, well, because I've been using it for 4 years, now they can maybe hold it for ransom so that I'm stuck. This is across the board in everything. And at some point you have to draw a line and say, I've had enough. And when I say that, I mean sincerely that. Now, in terms of, there are rules of engagement like GNC and what you can and can't say on the radio. But there are things that at some point I'm going to say, in terms of gender. I've watched how this Me Too movement has gone completely over the edge because of Bill Cosby. I've watched how now everybody's coming out of the woodworks, the Democrats to the Republicans, and who's Kavanaugh, and what the heck is going on with our Supreme Court, and what's that really all about? It's crazy, bandwagon-wise. And at some point, I don't know what to do about it. I can tell you...
Well, we're going to lose our tempers. That's what's going to happen.
Well, I don't want to lose my temper. I'm a sweet old man. I'm supposed to... I'm trying to keep my blood pressure down.
Well, that's what's going to happen, because we are going to lose our tempers because of these ridiculous things. So many years ago, I was on the air and local radio station, and also, I was on a couple of radio stations. And I was reading the news, and I learned about this girl in Virginia, 11-year-old girl. And she was visiting her father's place. I guess mom and dad were divorced, so she was visiting her father for the weekend, and this bird fell out of the nest. So she picked up the bird, took care of it. Mom came to pick her up to take her back to mom's place after the weekend visitation was over. And it was hot. So they didn't want to leave the bird in the car because it was really hot, like a summer day. So they brought the bird into one of those big box stores, like Lowe's. And while they were in there, this woman approached them. This woman approached mother and daughter with the bird, demanded to see ID. And foolishly, Mom produced the ID. This gal was an off-duty, fish and wildlife thug from the Commonwealth of Virginia. 10 days later, state police show up at Mom's house with a court appearance and a fine for transporting an endangered species, a woodpecker. Well, they nursed the woodpecker back to health. They released the woodpecker. Everything was fine, but that wasn't good enough for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So they were going to be hauled into court as criminals for rescuing a baby woodpecker. Now, to make the story worse, the young girl rescued the woodpecker because the cat in the backyard was about ready to eat the woodpecker. So there was a bona fide rescue on many levels by this 11-year-old. I heard about this and I was outraged. So I said that this girl and her mother shouldn't be hauled into court. This 11-year-old should get a plaque praising her for what she did, setting the example of how you can do the right thing. Well, I called the state. I called the local office in Richmond, Virginia. They sent me, I was run through the mill. Nobody knew anything. And finally, I got to headquarters in Virginia, and I said, look, I'm going to talk about this on the air. This girl deserves a plaque. What happened next was kind of interesting. The state came out with a press release saying that it was a clerical error. They always blame the clerks, right? Always blame the clerks. Not this thug who was at the big box store who demanded ID while off duty. No. It was blamed on a clerk, a clerical error, and the whole thing was dropped. Ultimately, I got contacted by one of our class members that she did, in fact, receive a plaque. Kind of nice.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
South Carolina might be the same thing with that woman.
Well, what we need to do is rise up and let people know when they're wrong, and expose them. Absolutely expose them. I've got another story to share with you about, a wrongdoing. And, and I would like to talk about counterfeiting. Very interesting story. Actually, a couple stories. We'll be right back. Doc Graham's with us. And then let's talk about a refinery and the ice melting and the planet wobbling and how that's affecting weather when we come back. Many years ago, before we had our first Get Prepared Expo, I'd never done an expo. And I decided that I could do one. And there were two other guys that I was going to do one with. So the three of us were equal partners in this expo. And there really wasn't any money involved except for all the driving around, meeting potential exhibitors and those kinds of things. And we were going to have it in Missouri. So it was my idea. I never did one before, never built one before. And it was the exact same format as the Get Prepared Expo, which would be USA Prepares Expo, my expo. So it came time to find the venue, and we found a venue. And we needed to put a deposit down to hold the venue. So most of the exhibitors were selected. They committed to do it. And we'll call this guy in quotes my ex-partner. He pulled out his credit card and put the small percentage down on his credit card. It wasn't even charged on his credit card. And we proceeded to finish out the expo and get the rest of the exhibitors and vendors and speakers and so forth. Well, a couple days before the expo, it was all ready to go. He called me and said, "You're out." He called our other partner, said, "You're out." And that was after he called the venue and said, "Those other two guys that were with me, they're not my partners, they're out." And he called all the exhibitors and vendors and said that, Finelli's not involved anymore and don't talk to him. This guy literally stole my expo. Literally. So it happens. It absolutely happens. So what's happened to this guy's expo? Well, it was an absolute flop because he didn't know how to run it. He didn't know how to run it. The exhibitors were mad at him. The things that I said that I would do for the exhibitors, he didn't do. So promises went unfulfilled. I had to call all the exhibitors and say, I got locked out of my own expo. I can't help you. This guy's called the police on me. I'll be arrested if I try to do anything. He's got it locked down. And there's nothing I can do. I can't honor the promises because not only have you had problems, but I've gotten thrown out of my own expo. And I've lost it. I mean, I've lost the expo. So you really need to be careful, very careful, class, who you go into business with. And I got to tell you, it's really hard to find people who are honest. It really is. So with the following expos, which are called the Get Prepared Expo, of which we had 7, I had no partners. Nobody. I learned really fast how dangerous it can be to have a partner. They can do things to you that you just wouldn't believe. And I can tell you this. I would never consider going to business with 2 classes of people. Well, maybe 3. One would be a cop. Never. Because they know how to push the system. They know how to call their friends. They know how to get you arrested. They know how to build a case against you, even if it's not true. Another class would be a politician. They lie. They cheat. They steal. And another class would be lawyers, because they do the same thing politicians do. So if you're going to go into business, be very careful of those 3 groups. Cops, politicians, and lawyers. So, and get it in writing. Whatever you do, get it in writing. But my advice to you is don't go into business with other people because things happen. Rick, has anything happened to you as a result of a partnership where you've been blindsided and had a significant loss because your business has been stolen from you, or your accounts, or your product, or your recipe, or your business model? Can you share any thoughts about that when we come back? I don't know. I hear Rick, but hey, Rick, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you have any comments from when we come back?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure I've got... Partnerships are like marriages.
Yep. All right. We'll be right back. Richard Allen Miller's with us. RichardAllenMiller.com. RichardAlanMiller.com. Mark in Illinois, welcome. You're on with Doc Ram.
Yeah, good morning. I've been listening to Doc Ram talking about all these things that have happened to him. And I have a testimony where I can, you had a man on Monday. It was this man named Mark, and he was talking about all these experiences that he had, and about all the type of, I call it like soul healing. But when I first went to Palestine in 2009, the first thing that happened to me when I stepped off the plane was I was arrested. And they questioned me, interrogated me for like about 4 hours. They told me that they were going to put me back on a plane, send me back to the States. I said I had a military escort waiting for me, and I did. And the thing is that when I got there, I went to Ramallah because I was stationed on a army base there. But the other things in my life I found out is that when I went to Palestine, that I already had that I already sort of knew, but I never let them know that I knew. Otherwise, I think if I would have let them know, and if they would have had any inclination of me knowing what I would know, I wouldn't be alive right now. But back in the 1948, when the Regan and the Stern Gang and the Haganah, all these communist Soviet Jews that came into Palestine and hijacked the system, and they murdered a lot of British people. They stole their land, they stole their money. And when I was in Effingham, Illinois, where I'm at right now in Illinois, I'm not in Effingham, but when I was in Effingham, Illinois in 2009, I was at a corporation called Pinnacle Foods, Genco, and they do all the distribution for the Walmart all over the entire world. So they're a massive shipping company, and all, freight and trucking and railroad and shipping and air and everything. So anyway, I stood there in front of the CEO, the human resources, the manager, and the superintendent, and the vice president and the president was on the phone. And these people said, you're the owner of this corporation. It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And, I understood, the implications of everything that was going on in my life. And it was like what you're talking about. It's, people that have stolen everything from you, including your family. And, they've done so much harm in your life that you probably would like to retaliate. But, the Lord says that he'll be faithful and that vengeance belongeth to him. And so, that's just my testimony of things I've gone through and waking up and realizing, the truth, and what do you do about it? And I just, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to deal with it?
Mark, why were you arrested?
I appreciate, I appreciate your story because I can relate to you in that way. It's like you have options or choices on how they're going to proceed. And I am doing everything I can to turn this event, losing my website, whatever, being arrested in Israel, whatever, that as a growing experience that I don't ever allow happen again. It's one thing to make a mistake. It's another thing to repeat the mistake. And so that's why we're supposedly evolving. We're supposed to be here to learn why we do it this way, not that way. And it changes because, like partnerships, Vincent asked me if I had a comment about what he was talking about, and it all relates. Partnerships are like marriages. They're good ones and they're bad ones. Now, what I have determined or discovered is that before you even get love in the sexual context comes and goes, but friendships themselves are the highest form of love there is. And so that before I have ever considered going into a partnership with someone, he must first have been my friend for at least 10 years. That's my role. That's what I call a friend, too. Someone that I've known more than 10 years, because you get to see their ups and their downs, and you get the full measure of a person. You see when they're doing well and when they're not doing well, and how they behave. And marriages are the same thing. We all change. Our values change. And so most often people don't realize that when they select a partner, a mate, they're doing it to reflect that inner feminine part of self inside myself. The most perfect woman is me inside, internally. And I try to externalize that by selecting a girlfriend that I might date and hang out with as a way of having dialogue with my inner self. And that's why in the old Jewish traditions of the Tree of Life, the two primary ways to get to God, from the masculine and the feminine side, the outer parts of the ladder on the Tree of Life, were the hermit and the lovers. It's like an androgynous relationship with self. And while often marriages break that's mostly because the woman, I'm going to speak from a man's point of view now, not, this is back same ways, that woman no longer reflects the inner part of myself and how I've changed. And so it isn't her fault. And if she's my friend, I still reflect and care for that person because it was there in the beginning. And so that is one of the criteria now that I try to choose partners. And I have them all shapes and sizes. My latest one is Russell Rengie. He, on his own, did a bunch of audiobooks by, taking a project that I would never have done, and on his own created 10, right now there are 10 major audio books on courses I taught at Harvard that I would never have dreamt of making them into audiobooks. And so he's my partner on that. And we just did our first exchange of settling up on who gets what. And I am so grateful because that partner made something happen in my physical life today that I would not have otherwise done and wanted to. And so that's one of the reasons one has a partner. You can't do it all yourself. And you have mutual goals and dreams and purpose. And that's when we band together to make something happen. That's why I work with Vincent in this regard. It isn't for all the books that are not going to be sold. I don't hardly get any kind of response from promoting myself on GNC or GCN. However, the pleasure of having to get to know someone like you and the listeners in my audience that have come into my personal life, I'm wealthy beyond measure. And so that's where we should be grateful. Grateful for the people that come into our lives and somehow cause disruption, because that turns out to be what makes me different than Vincent. And that is a blessing, not a limitation. The wounds we receive are actually what makes us more unique. And if we're clever enough, and I'm just learning how to do this now, you can turn these limitations and wounds. I'll never date another woman. Those places, those become tools in a toolbox where I can do something that another person can't. And that's what I'm writing about.
Cocoon, and it means the healing of the soul. And, I read in the book of Hebrews where it says, I think it's Hebrews chapter 4, where it says, it pleased the Father that his Son should suffer the way that he did before he went to the cross and during his time on the cross. And I don't think a man has ever suffered as much as that man, the Lord Jesus, too. But it said it pleased the Father that he should suffer, and the cocoon is the healing of the soul. I think that's what this is all about.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's an excellent quote. Thank you for that. I knew it existed somewhere in the Bibles, but I didn't know where. Thank you. That's what I'm talking about. The fact that we're blessed with these wounds. And that is what makes a superior man. A superior person. Excuse me, women. And the thing that I've got confused now is how I'm going to separate the 36 different genders that now exist. I don't get that one.
Well, Mark,
I don't know, man.
For you.
This world and it's political. What? Go ahead.
Mark, you mentioned that you landed in Palestine and you were arrested. Why were you arrested?
Well, I was arrested because basically they wanted to. I think this is what I can assume because of everything that the awakening that's happened in my life in the last 14 years is that they really wanted to see what I knew. And being like you talk about, acting like Columbo, and just kind of like, letting them, I didn't let them see anything that what I did know. And when I was in Jerusalem afterwards, living in Jerusalem as well for 3 months, I was, the Lord informed me that I had a threat upon my life and that prayed that all my tickets would be changed. And they were all changed. I didn't change any of them. But when I got to the airport, my tickets were canceled.
2022 is going to be a great year, class. That's the year Rick and I are going to be friends.
Oh, that's it, man. You're in Proby. I'm going to call you Proby right now, man. You're a Proby. That's actually old school, the way my father taught me. Now, I'm not like that. I'm too stupid. I'm more open and trusting.
Mark,
yeah, especially with the likes of people like you, man. I have no idea where I'm going with you.
Mark,
but you know
Illinois,
what? The amount of years that somebody remains married to someone else, like you and Sandy, that is laudable. That is something to be proud of, because it's not easy, because you both change. And the fact that you have somehow agreed to disagree and yet remain the closest friends as a lover, that is something that is very, very rare.
Every once in a while, Mrs. Finelli will say to me, husband trade-in day is on Friday in Springfield. And so we've been joking about that for years. It used to be in Richmond, and now it's in Springfield, Missouri. So, Mark, I had a question for you. Do you have a definition of friendship?
Well, I had a man tell me when I was traveling, I was in Nebraska, and he told me, he said that if you have 2 friends or 3 friends in life, you really accomplished something in your life.
Mm-hmm. No question about that. And I'll share a story.
Wait a minute, one more. I want to add one point. I would say a friend is someone that you like because of their faults, not in spite of their faults.
Okay.
Vincent.
Well, I was thinking, we were going to try to wrestle DocRam.com back for you, and there was just a few instructors that were going to try to do it, but when we saw the price, we realized we couldn't do it at $19,999. But in case you're wondering if you have some friends, Rick, you do. Okay, within USA Prepares as well as within the classroom. Many years ago, when I lived in Virginia, our son was very young, and he said, "So, Dad, what's the definition of a friend?" And wow, okay. So I said, "Well, in monetary terms, the definition of a friend is someone who will lend you $1,000, no questions asked." So I got on the computer, and I sent an email to Bert Bertonis. I've known him for a long time. And so I just said, Bert, can you lend me $1,000? Thank you, Vincent. Just to see what would happen. Email came back. I can't do it right now. And he wasn't able to do it right then. But he would have if he could have. Okay? So that was the only time I tried it to see what would happen. And he never knew until, maybe within the last year I told him. And this was a long time ago. I would say 18 years ago, something like that. A long time ago. So that is my little story about a friendship. But I don't think it's a monetary thing. I had trouble explaining to our young son what the definition of a friend is. And you're absolutely right, Mark. I've heard, if you can count the number of real friends that you have by the time you're an older person on one hand, you've done very well. So you've heard 2, I've heard 5. Mark, thanks so much for being with us. Rick Miller, you and I will be back right after top of the hour news and commercial announcements. Unless, Mark, you have another comment, or do you have one?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, Mark. All right.
Yeah,
Doc Graham and I... Yeah, we'll be right back, and let's talk about this refinery that was built in 1916, Ashland, Kentucky. It's been burning aflame ever since, and how does that affect the temperature of the earth? And everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? There we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, for years on Interstate 64 in Ashland, Kentucky, I've been driving past this refinery, and it's got this, cracking tower, and there's this big flame that comes out. Obviously, it's a combustible gas. Obviously, they've got a problem disposing of it, so they just let it burn and burn and burn. And now this refinery in Kentucky was built in 1916 by the Great Eastern Refining Company. And it was then purchased in 1924 by Ashland Refining Company. And right now it's operated and owned by Marathon Petroleum Corporation. So it's an oil refinery. It makes gasoline and, motor oils and those products through cracking. And this flame just keeps burning. Now, this is just the reason I'm mentioning this. This flame has probably been continuous or almost continuous since 1916. Well, that is just a small byproduct of the refining. They typically produce more than 277,000 barrels a day. They employ 1,600 people. And so this thing is going on and on and on, and they're producing oil and gasoline and diesel and so forth. And the point is, what about all the other things that they produce that become burned, like gasoline and diesel and home heating oil? And so going into the air, we have all of this heat and it's just one refinery, of which there are many refineries throughout the United States. Well, the link to that would be the Earth is wobbling now. And they're saying that the Earth is wobbling because of increases in temperature. And, for example, the ice melt in Greenland plays a role in the Earth wobbling. It's an effect that this has that is just, instead of the Earth revolving around the sun, it's wobbling while it revolves around the sun. And I believe that there is a link to our weather. For example, last night it was in the 50s here in Missouri. Well, a couple of weeks ago, it was so hot you couldn't stand it. Now, we're down in the 50s at night. Do you think this is true, Rick, that things like warming the planet by burning all of these, we'll call them fossil fuels, because that's the term that's used, is causing some of this?
Well, yes and no. Let's talk about this for one moment. First, you made a statement about the Earth circling the sun.
Revolving
and that's
around
not,
the sun.
Well, no. It's an important concept here.
That's what I was
Because
taught.
the Earth doesn't actually circle the sun. More, the Earth is trying to catch the sun, and it's going in a helix, or what it would appear to be around the sun, but in fact is trying to catch the sun in a trail of debris that the sun is going through. Now, normally, the sun is shooting through the universe as an arrow, and the Earth is in a helix trying to catch the sun. The sun is held onto the earth, so it's actually, in fact, not circling the sun, but trailing the sun in a helix. Now, once you understand that change in thinking, then you realize that the sun is a protection of some sort in that it's going through, in the universe, debris. A vacuum is not really a vacuum. It's full of garbage. Just like the Earth's got a bunch of garbage around it, the universe has its garbage. And the sun goes through that garbage and causes the sun to have sunspots and anomalies. Right now, the sun is in a solar minimum. And so rather than particles and debris hitting the sun and being absorbed by the sun, they are going around the sun and now hitting the earth. And as a result, the earth is expanding. It is absorbing neutrinos and garbage that the sun would normally otherwise absorb are now hitting the earth. And these are cycles in historical reasons why we have epochs. And when we return to the place where we started 24,000 years ago in the deep universe, we have different garbage cycles in that universe, in the galaxy that we call the galaxy. And we have cycles of the Earth expanding and causing global shifts because of what's going on. So yes, man is responsible, but not in terms of the total percentages. It's something like 1 or 2%. And the rest of it has to do with the fact that the Earth is now getting a lot of garbage that it would normally not otherwise enjoy. And because of that, we have so-called, quote, end of days, which actually, in fact, means changing of the seasons. And when I say changing of the seasons, like in our limited lifespan, we're all noticing that the sun is coming up a little later today, and it's a little colder in the morning. And while it might get to 95 degrees today, there is more dew on the ground. And that's what we call seasons. Well, the Earth has other seasons that we don't notice because they're in terms of thousands of years. And it's important to see the broader picture of what's actually happening with Earth and not try to blame it for political reasons on a smokestack that is creating poisonous gases that will cause dementia. I wouldn't want to live in China right now, and the breathing the air that they currently enjoy. America has got its own problems, but in one sense of it, I'm glad and proud to be an American. While we are the biggest bullies in world history, probably, that's an embarrassment. And yet, we take for granted a lot of the freedoms that, how would you like to be in Yemen right now as a child that's starving? And there is absolutely no reason for anyone on earth at this moment to be in starving mode. And yet, it's happening, and you can blame that on politics. Now, it's pictures within pictures, frames within frames. And the broader picture is that we are going through natural cycles, and it's not going to be man that causes the end of man. It's going to be the Earth localizing the infection. Sorry, I'm such a grumpy old man that way.
But Rick, I'm a little confused. Now, I understand that we go through these 11-year cycles, right?
Well, that's one cycle, yeah. You've got your emotional cycle, right. Biorhythms, you've got all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that one 11-year cycle where we have solar minimums and maximums. Now, the solar minimums, would we tend to expect cooler weather at a solar minimum?
I don't know. It depends on where the sun is in the universe at that time and what's going to be hitting the Earth.
Okay. So would we say that a solar minimum is the absence or lessening of solar flares? Is that what we're saying?
Yes. Solar minimum means there's less solar flares, yes. That's one of the definitions of a solar minimum.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the weirdest thing because I would think that with more solar flares, I would have greater solar energy being generated by our solar array. Well, we are now at a solar minimum, and we are generating lots more electricity than we ever have before. The sun appears to be brighter. It appears to be hotter. It appears to make me sweat way more. Maybe it's because I'm older, but I don't ever remember perspiring like I do now. So we've got that anecdotal evidence. We have the measurable anecdotal evidence of I can go out and we're generating about almost 5,000 watts right now. It's not even high noon. The sun isn't directly over the solar panels yet. It's got a couple hours more to go before we hit maximum electricity generation. But yet we are generating more electricity than we have, before. So how does this?
Yeah. Some of that is our atmosphere and how it's changing. And right now, we have more UVBs. This is the longer wavelength in the ultraviolet that you cannot see hitting the earth and making it to the surface of soil. And a few radios back, we talked about how the farmer in the Midwest is noticing the difference in terms of how many flies are on the cow pies, how many ants are running on the surface of the soil, and how many bees are out pollinating things. Some of that is GMO, some of it isn't.
I got a comment about that when we come back, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's about flies, birds, bees, grasshoppers. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. Class, if you'd like to go to his website and learn more about Rick, his writings, and buy his books, richardallenmiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. So, Rick, from what I've observed here at the farm over the summer, not too many grasshoppers, not too many birds, not too many bees, not too many flies. I didn't see much of that. Previously, plenty, I'm talking, maybe 13, 12 years ago, a lot more birds, a lot more bees, a lot more flies. We're plagued with grasshoppers. Don't see too much of that anymore. What are your thoughts?
I'm concerned with our biosphere is changing. There is absolutely no question. The sun today is a different color than it was when I was a child. The summer, we didn't even have a summer here on the West Coast. We had like maybe 4 or 5 days of actual clear sky. The few days that were clear from smoke from the fires were then, messed up with geoengineering, so that it was, I think we only had maybe 5 days this year of actually, literally clear skies. And the temperatures were not as bad as they were. Last year, we had 12 weeks of triple digits in Oregon. And that's extremely rare. Is it global warming? is it global cooling? The correct answer is yes. It's all true. How can that be? One is the opposite of the other. It depends a lot on what yardstick you're using to make your measurement. I remember in physics, by the way, isn't any different than religion. In fact, they are precisely the same part on the opposite end of an hourglass. And really, the physics, for example, starts with assumed truths. You know, the shortest distance between 2 points. And today, that's no longer a truth. And because of that, it changes everything. Then you go to definitions. Is it a meme or is it an egregor? And when you realize the assumptions of belief systems, which turn again out to be, in many, many forms, arbitrary. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It means that they are arbitrary, and it depends on which part of the world you grew up, as to what you're going to believe is true, like the superiority of a woman. So, with all of that said, we have a cultural clash of values. And with that comes the way we make a measurement to justify or argue a position or belief system. But actually, beliefs, like wounds, are tools in a toolbox. And do you make the hammer this way, or do you make it with a soft mallet? Well, it depends on what you're trying to do. And if you want to go to heaven, well, then you've got to have a belief system that makes and justifies your belief that you're going to heaven. Right now, there were parts of the Bible that would suggest that this is purgatory, an in-between place between here and there. And from a point of view that I use, that's absolutely true. This is a brief moment in time, and it's not real. And it's the moment in an hourglass going from this point to that point. And the 2 points don't exist because space isn't real.
Okay. Mark, the Spark is coming up right after these few short commercial announcements at the bottom of the hour. And Mark must have heard us talking about him, so he's calling in. Looking forward to that. And then let's talk about some plastic and what's happening to microfibers and what happens when we wash our clothes and how it's getting into the food chain. Richard, ALANMiller.com. Mark the Spark in Pennsylvania must have heard us talking about him. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, Vincent. Hello, Dr. Ram. First, I'd like to acknowledge you both because whenever I listen to the two of you, I learn so much. And Richard, you inspire my desire to want to know more, and more importantly, you inspire my desire to ask better questions of myself and of my world. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
On the subject of what you guys were talking about earlier in the first hour, my sense of it is that what's going on is there's a lot of deception going on, and my take on that is that I do believe that there's dark forces working against good forces. And from what I've learned, and I learned this from somebody who actually happened to have inherited a great fortune. I met him in Springfield, Missouri, but he had moved to the Ozarks. He bought several farms composed of several thousand acres, turns out, and he was about 25 years my senior, maybe your age, Dr. Miller, maybe even a little bit older, but he had inherited a great fortune. It turned out his grandfather was in the concrete business at the turn of the century, turn of the early 1900s, and they lived in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. For those that don't know, Bartlesville, Oklahoma is the base for Phillips 66 Petroleum, which is now ConocoPhillips or whatever names they've changed to now. But my friend Larry, he actually grew up in a 3-story house that was huge. It had an elevator in it. Okay, it kind of gives you an idea, because his grandfather made a fortune in the concrete casings, the concrete business, making the casings for the oil wells that, when they were wildcatting in the early 1900s, finding oil here and there and everywhere in Oklahoma and Texas. So, but when it came time for my friend to inherit the businesses, he decided he didn't want to have anything to do with it, and he sold everything off, and he traveled around the world to search for the truth, and he had the wherewithal to do it. And what he came back with was a couple of things. The Hopi, the culture that inspired him the most was the Hopi and the Sioux, but even deeper, the Olmecs and the Toltecs, which predated the Mayans. And so he opened my world to my perspective is seeing things differently. Telling me about the Mayans, had all these different calendars. And my sense of the Mayans is that they were, and what Larry said, he believed they were time travelers. They were way ahead of their time, and they had all these calendars that many think that they were tracking the star system, but actually he says they were tracking time and energy patterns. And I think Richard, you talk about that in many ways. So my sense of it is also that our consciousness on our DNA level, we have so much potential in the codons of the DNA structure. My understanding is that we have yet to tap into the mainstay of our codons, our codon treasury, you might call it. Okay, so the other side knows this. The dark side knows this, and they definitely don't want humanity to wake up. They don't want our consciousness to go there, because once we do, the gig is up and no more deception. We will know what each other knows, because we'll be able to intuitively, we just know, and we'll be able to tap into knowledge that is timeless. And it's not over here, over there. It's everywhere, right here, right now, and it's accessible by all. So my sense of it is the dark side is scurrying around like crazy to try to suppress us, so we will not break through to that level of consciousness where the gig is up and they no longer can deceive us. Have we not had enough deception on planet Earth? Have we not, how are these wars promoted? Through deception. How are the thieves in all the areas of our, the different areas of our lives, how's all this deception going on? Or how is this thievery and bad things going on? It's going on through deception. So, I really appreciate you guys being there and tapping into these ideas of deeper, ways of seeing things. And on the subject of human relationship, this deal about what comes up for me is value versus, what we call money, but it isn't money. It's artificial. It's debt. These are debt instruments. If it was money, it would actually be a value standard, but it isn't money because it's not based on anything real. It's based on deception. So, but we, many people, we've succumbed, been conditioned that money, or this artificial money, is, that's how you value things. Well, I say it's a poor standard for valuing things, a very poor standard, because what's more valuable to me as a human being is consciousness, is creativity, compassion, inspiration, the intangibles that are they're priceless. How can you put a price on these things, So, I don't know what else to say. I'm just so inspired every time I listen to you guys parse this stuff out, and I appreciate you, Vince, because when you ask Richard these questions, he sometimes he addresses what you're saying, but then he goes a little bit off tangent. But when he goes off tangent, some brilliant perspective comes up, just brilliant, and it awakens me to say, wow, I never saw it like that. And so thank you again for clarifying things for us out here in what we're dealing with. By the way, Vincent, I sent you an email about something that's happened in Missouri, and I think it may be happening across our land in communities here, there, and everywhere under the radar, and that's they've lowered the bar on what a felony is now in Missouri. What used to be a Class A misdemeanor is now a Class E felony. And is that not, and this has been happening over a 10-year period, and they've snuck it in, really, beyond our, another deception to further infringe upon our mobility and our right to, it could affect a lot of people retroactively. They'll probably try to put this forth retroactively. Well, it could affect, these days, a misdemeanor. You could jaywalk and get a misdemeanor. And if you get a couple of them, I think they add them up, put them together, and make it a more serious crime, and which violates our right to bear arms, for one thing, and generally our mobility, right? So, it supports the authoritarian model of that we dare not question authority because they want to claim authority over us, but we are the authority of our lives. And I appreciate that about you, Vincent, because you inspire me to retain the authority of my own life. And so thank you very much
Mark,
for that.
I've got a comment. I saw your email this morning, and I went to click on the link, and my browser wouldn't let me. So I was unable to look at it. But I understand what you're saying about lowering the standards of which one can commit a felony. And for years I've been saying on the air that I have a recommendation for a bill. It's just one sentence long, and it goes something like this. Any representative who votes on a bill to become law without reading and understanding every word shall be guilty of a felony punishable by not less than 10 years in prison.
Wow. Yeah. That's pretty, that'd get their attention.
Well, it's only one sentence long, okay? It's really simple. So if our representatives, allegedly, people who we have allegedly voted for and allegedly represent us, if they vote on a bill without reading it and without understanding every word, are guilty of a felony punishable by not less than 10 years in prison. And I mean it, because, the health bill, Obamacare, well, you've got to vote on it before we can let you read it. Really? How ridiculous is that? How ridiculous is that?
How ridiculous.
And I met with the guy. I was at a restaurant, and he was the speaker. And he was the guy who reviews, in Missouri, all bills presented for vote as to their constitutionality. And I said to him, well, how many people do you have working for you? He said, about 35. I said, well, how much do they make on average? About $35,000. I said, okay. So what we're going to do, and I said this publicly, so what we'll do is we'll let you keep your job. But everyone else gets fired. We don't need them. Because what we're going to do is that we're going to require that all bills be boiled down to one sentence, like the one I just read.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And he said that'll never happen because it's too simple. It's too simple. We can't have one-sentence bills. There need to be loopholes. So we've got people who are working against us. But I don't think he appreciated the fact that I said that we would fire his entire department. And I meant it. I meant it. And he said that right now there's a backlog because the bills are so complex. that they take a lot of time to figure out whether the bills that these alleged representatives write are actually constitutional. But then if you go to Lebanon, Missouri, and you talk to the city manager, he'll say they don't go by the Constitution of Missouri. They have their own policies and procedures. So the Constitution is not in play in Lebanon, Missouri, which is why we haven't had any more expos there, because the Constitution is not in play. Anything goes. It's whatever the government wants to do, the government corporation of the city of Lebanon, Missouri. It's a problem. Mark, any other comments?
No, that's it. I appreciate you guys being there. Keep on keeping on and asking the keen questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark the Spark in Pennsylvania. Okay, when we get back, plastic. Plastic in the water. Plastic in the ocean. Plastic in our food supply. Microfibers. I think this is going to be an eye-opener, class. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. So, Rick, when we first moved to Missouri, I asked a guy, so what do we do with these old tires? You know, the tires that have cracked, the tires that have, ozone cracks from the sun in them, or worn out tires. What do you do with them? He said, it's real easy. Here's what you do. So you take that Sawzall, reciprocating saw, and you cut the sidewall from the tread on both sides. So now you have these rings that were once the sidewall, and you have the tread. So you have two rings of sidewalls, and then you have the tread. And then you put it in the trash. That doesn't sound like a really good solution to what do we do with old tires. So I looked up retreads or recapping tires. Now, it used to be that we would take an old tire carcass, if it was usable, meaning it wasn't worn down, past the plies in the tread, you could get it recapped. Well, heck, I'm looking at a website right now, Tire Recappers, and they've got recapped light truck tires, 265, 75, 16, common size for trucks. Well, they range from $99 to $115 each. Well, that's pretty much the price of a new tire. So why would I want some mismatched recaps at almost the price of a new tire? So it's not a good solution, except, we grind up tires and we make playground mulch out of them. I'm not sure I want my children playing around in that. So we don't have a good solution, in my opinion, to tires. And then let's move on to plastic. What do we do with plastic? Well, right now, our ocean is full of bits of plastic. Plastic bottles, straws, cups, the list goes on and on, bags. We just, throw it in the ocean. And then what happens is the life in the ocean, whether it be plant or animal, eat the plastic. And it's worse than that, because right now about 60% of our clothing material is made up of plastic. Synthetic fibers are cheap, they're versatile, and they stretch, and allegedly they breathe. And so what happens when you wash your clothes in the washing machine, whether it be a front loader or a top loader, out of about 13 pounds of clothes that are washed, you get about 750,000 plastic fibers that are acrylic, and about 500,000 plastic fibers that are polyester, and about 1/8 plastic fibers that are polyester cotton blend. So the wash water, the rinse water, and the wash water that's dumped out of our washing machines ends up going into the ground. It goes into the water supply. And, of course, we get to dine at our favorite restaurant and eat it. Are you concerned?
Well, yeah, it's DuPont and better living through chemistry. And everything is overpackaged using plastic. He started with gunpowder and moved to plastic, and it's on everything, including our automobiles today. As for tires, I use them in my garden for growing tomatoes because it keeps the soil warmer with the black tire absorbing, and you can grow tomatoes one further month using stacks of tires. And that's where I put my old tires, is in my garden as a building up, holding the warmth in the soil longer. You can fill individual tires with dirt and stack them up. And that's your tree for tomatoes and or trees, for fruit trees.
Are you concerned about the inner part of the tire being consumed by the plants that we're growing in our garden, or is that a better solution than concrete blocks with ash and?
Well, I don't know, man. When you see them smoking, trying to burn the tire to get rid of it, that's kind of creepy. I don't have a solution to these things. I don't know what to do about plastic. Plastic is, I would say, 70% of my garbage. Plastic.
Absolutely it is. No question. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, thanks so much for being with us. And just think, class, in 4 years from now, Rick and I are going to be friends. Yep.
Stop that, Vincent. Stop that.
Thanks so much, Rick.